The auction block. The night market of Zara Prime was alive with noise. Lights and the bitter smell of smoke. Alien traders shouted over one another, their voices rough, their words sharp. The stalls glowed with neon colors, pink, green, and blue, all reflecting on the wet metallic floor. Slaves stood on raised platforms like broken statues, waiting to be sold. Some were young, some were old, but all of them had the same look in their eyes, the look of defeat. In the center of the market stood Sarai. She was 24, her frame thin, her shoulders weak from chains. Her skin was a pale green with faint golden undertones, her copper-red hair falling messy around her face. Her eyes, once bright and proud, now looked tired and distant. The crowd of buyers did not see her as a person, only as damaged goods. Her leg was injured, a scar running down from her thigh to her ankle. Every step she took was slow and painful, and because of this, no one wanted her. The trader beside her raised his hand and shouted, "Just one bottle of liquor for the broken slave who wants her?" The crowd laughed loudly. Some pointed, some jeered. Others walked away without a second glance. To them, she was worth less than the drink they carried in their hands. Sarai's heart sank, but she did not show it. She had already been rejected by 7 buyers that night. Each one had looked at her, judged her, and turned away. Her spirit felt crushed. But her body stood because it had no choice. Chains held her wrists together, and the trader forced her to remain upright. From the far corner of the marketplace, a figure watched quietly. He was human, tall, dressed in a simple military jacket. His face was hard from years of war, his eyes sharp and steady. He did not laugh with the crowd. He did not turn away. Instead, he studied her with silence, as if he was looking past the scars and the weakness, as if he was searching for something hidden that no one else could see. The trader noticed the human watching. He smirked and shouted again, "Come on, just one bottle of liquor. A fair trade for a broken thing." More laughter rolled through the crowd, but the human did not smile. He stepped forward, his boots hitting the ground with heavy echoes. The laughter around him slowed, buyers and traders turning their heads. Why would a human soldier walk toward something everyone else had already rejected? Sarai lifted her eyes slightly. She did not know why he came closer. Her first thought was fear. Every time someone stepped forward, it only meant more pain. She braced herself for cruel words, or worse, a cruel hand. The human stopped in front of the platform. The trader grinned, sure that no serious offer would come. But then the human reached into his jacket and pulled out credit chips. The amount was far more than the mock price, far more than anyone expected. The crowd gasped, some whispering, some angry that he would waste such credits on someone useless. The trader's grin froze, then widened because profit was profit. He grabbed the chips without hesitation, unhooked the chains, and shoved Sarai forward. She stumbled, her injured leg shaking under her. Before she could fall, the human caught her, steadying her with strong hands. The touch was not rough, not cruel, it was careful. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm, heavy, and smelled faintly of iron and smoke. For the first time in many years, she felt covered, not exposed. The trader laughed, thinking the human a fool. "Take her, soldier, she's yours now." "Though I still say she's worth only liquor," the crowd murmured. Some mocking, some confused, but the human ignored them all. He looked down at Sarai, his voice low. "You're safe now," he said, simple words. But they cut through the noise of the market. Sarai's breath caught, her heart not sure if it should believe. Safe, she thought. Could a slave ever be safe? The human guided her away from the platform. Every step she took was uncertain, but his hand on her shoulder was steady. The crowd's noise faded behind them, replaced by the hum of the city's towers. Sarai dared not look up at him. Her mind was filled with questions, doubts, and fear. Why would he buy her? Why would he spend so much? What did he want from her? No one gave without taking, no one cared without a reason. The human walked with calm silence. He did not explain himself. He did not demand anything from her. Yet his presence was like a shield against the world around them. Sarai felt her chest tighten, her voice whispering only to herself. Why would a human see worth in me? And so the night ended with a broken slave taken from the stage. Not by pity, not by cruelty, but by a man who saw more than chains. The market that once laughed at her would not remember her name. But for Sarai, everything had changed. Because for the first time in a long time, someone had not walked away. The humans bid. The neon streets stretched around them. filled with the hum of broken machines and the whisper of faraway voices. Sarai walked slowly beside the human, her steps unsteady, her leg dragging slightly. The jacket around her shoulders felt unreal, too soft for someone who had lived so long in chains. Every movement made her wonder when the truth would reveal itself. No one gave kindness freely, not in this world. She thought soon he would show his real reason, and it would be like all the others. The human led her through a narrow alley. Away from the market noise, he walked with calm steps, his presence heavy but not threatening. The silence between them was not empty. It was full of unspoken questions. Finally, she whispered, "Why? Why did you buy me?" Her voice was weak. Cracked from thirst, her eyes stared at the ground. Afraid of the answer, the man did not stop walking. But his voice came low and firm. "My name is Rylan, Captain Rylan," he said. "I didn't buy you, I freed you." The word struck her harder than the chains ever had. Freed, she thought. The word tasted impossible. Slaves were not freed. Not unless someone wanted them for a different kind of cage. Sarai shook her head. "No one spends credits like that for nothing," she whispered. Her heart beat fast, afraid to hope. Rylan finally stopped walking and turned to her. His eyes were sharp, yet they held no cruelty, he said. "Because I saw something in you, something they did not." He pointed at her chest. Worth. One word, simple and direct, but it broke through the wall around her heart. The memory of the auction flashed in her mind. The trader's laugh, the crowd's jeers, the words, "just one bottle of liquor." She clenched her hands, her nails biting into her palms. That was what she had been reduced to, a trade cheaper than bread. But here stood a human soldier saying the opposite. It felt like a lie, a trick, and yet his tone carried no deceit. They reached an old shelter made of steel panels and broken neon signs. Rylan opened the door and led her inside. The room was small but clean, a table with 2 chairs, a heater glowing faintly in the corner. Sarai froze at the entrance. She had expected a cage, a lock, a dark room where she would once again be used. Instead, she saw a space meant for living. Not for chains. Rylan gestured to the chair. "Sit," he said simply. She hesitated, then lowered herself slowly, her injured leg shaking as she sat down. He moved to the heater, warming his hands, then placed a ration pack on the table. "Eat," he said, sliding it toward her. Her hands trembled as she opened it, the smell of real food rising to her nose. Her stomach twisted in hunger, but her mind screamed not to trust. Still, she took a small bite and then another. Tears formed in her eyes before she even realized. Rylan watched her quietly. He did not smile. He did not comfort her with words. But his silence was not cold, it was patient. He let her eat. Let her remember what it felt like to be treated as someone alive. When she finally pushed the pack away, half-eaten, she whispered again. "Why?" Her voice cracked on the single word. "Why would a human see worth in me when even my own people called me broken?" Rylan leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. "Because I know what broken feels like," he said. His tone carried weight, the kind of weight only soldiers carried. He lifted his sleeve, showing a scar that ran deep across his forearm. "I've been left behind too," he said. "But scars don't erase who we are." His gaze locked on hers, steady and strong. "You're not broken, Sarai. You are surviving." Her chest tightened at his words. For so long she had been told she was less, useless, trash. And now this stranger spoke like she was still a person. Still a warrior. She wanted to believe him. But fear held her back. Her body shook with silent conflict, her voice whispering, "If I believe you and you lie, it will break me worse than chains ever did." Rylan leaned back, his expression unreadable. "Then don't believe me now," he said softly. "Watch what I do, not what I say." The words lingered in the air like a promise stronger than chains, stronger than cruelty. That night Sarai lay on a cot in the corner of the shelter, the heater's glow warm against her face. She stared at the ceiling, her mind racing. Every sound of the city outside made her flinch. Every memory clawed at her heart. But then she remembered his voice, low and steady. "I saw worth in you." Her chest ached. Her hands clutched the blanket, and for the first time in years, she let herself whisper into the dark. "Maybe," the word trembled on her lips. "Maybe I am not broken." First steps to freedom. The morning air of Zara Prime was thick with dust and smoke. The city never truly slept, its towers buzzing with broken lights and its streets crawling with shadows. Sarai stepped outside the shelter for the first time, wrapped still in the human's jacket. Her leg ached with every step, yet she walked. Because the chains were gone, it felt unreal, like a dream that could shatter at any moment. Captain Ryland followed behind her, his stride steady, his gaze sharp. He kept a hand near his weapon, always watching the corners. Always ready. Sarai noticed it, and fear stirred inside her. She thought maybe this was it. Maybe he would sell her again. Maybe he would hand her over to another master. The city was full of such trades. People passed from one hand to another like coins. She looked at him carefully, waiting for the mask of kindness to drop. The streets were alive with merchants shouting prices. With gangs watching from shadows, Sarai kept her head low, afraid that someone might recognize her as the broken slave from the auction. The words echoed in her head like poison. Just one bottle of liquor, that was all her worth to them. Her fists clenched tighter inside the jacket. Trying to hide her trembling, Ryland led her into a food stall, the smell of broth and spiced bread filling the air. The vendor froze at the sight of Sarai, his eyes narrowing. He looked at her leg, her scar, her face, and sneered. "Didn't know humans wasted their credits on trash," he muttered. Sarai's body stiffened, shame rising in her chest like fire. She expected Ryland to ignore it, to laugh along, maybe even agree. But instead, he placed credits on the counter without a word. His eyes locked on the vendor, cold and unflinching. The man swallowed his words and turned away quickly. Ryland took the food and handed it to Sarai. "Eat," he said simply. His tone was calm, but there was an edge in it that silenced any more insults. They sat on a small bench outside. Sarai looked down at the bowl, steam rising into the cool morning. Her stomach growled, but she hesitated. She whispered, Why do you do this?" Her voice was shaky, her eyes not meeting his. "No one gives without taking," she added. Her hands trembled as she held the food. Ryland leaned back against the bench. His arms crossed, his gaze swept the crowd, always scanning, never resting. Finally he said, "You think I will use you?" Like they did. It was not a question, it was a truth spoken aloud. Sarai's throat tightened, she nodded slightly. He turned his head and met her eyes for the first time. "I didn't save you to use you," he said. "I saved you because I don't leave people behind." His voice was firm, steady, carrying weight that made her chest ache. She ate slowly, the warmth spreading through her body, but the doubt in her heart did not vanish. Every kindness felt like a trick, a trap waiting to close. Yet when she looked at him, she saw no hunger, no cruelty in his eyes, only scars, both visible and hidden. And it confused her more than chains ever had. They walked further into the city. Neon signs flickered above them. Gangs whispered in alleys. Ryland kept her close, his hand always guiding her away from trouble. At one point, a group of scavengers blocked the road, their eyes fixed on Sarai. One of them laughed, thought she was already sold off cheap. Another reached forward as if to grab her. But Ryland stepped in front, his hand resting on his weapon. The scavengers froze at his stare. A stare like cold steel. Without a word, they backed away, muttering curses as they vanished into the crowd. Sarai's heart pounded. Every muscle in her body wanted to run, but her injured leg betrayed her. She looked at Ryland, the way he stood between her and danger. Her chest tightened with something she had almost forgotten. Safety. But safety was dangerous. Safety made you hope. And hope could destroy you worse than chains. That night, back in the shelter, she sat by the heater. Her eyes reflected the small orange glow. Her thoughts heavy, Ryland worked quietly at the table, cleaning his weapon, his movements calm and precise. Finally, she whispered, almost too soft to hear, "Why do you not ask for anything?" Ryland did not look up, but his voice came steady. "Because you've already given enough." Sarai frowned. Not understanding, he added, "You've given years of your life to chains, to pain, to cruelty." His voice lowered. "I won't take more from you." The words sank deep into her. She stared at him, confused, lost, afraid. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever treated her like her pain mattered. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "If I believe you, I will break if you lie." Ryland looked at her then, his eyes sharp but gentle. "Then don't believe yet," he said. "Wait." And see, the night was quiet except for the hum of the city outside. Sarai lay on the cot again, pulling the blanket tight around her. Her mind swirled with doubt and fragile sparks of something new. Not trust, not yet, but the beginning of it. She whispered into the dark, maybe he is different. And for the first time in many years, her tears did not taste only of despair. but of something close to hope. The past revealed. The heater hummed softly in the corner of the shelter. Outside, the city groaned with the noise of neon signs and distant shouts. But inside, the room was quiet, almost too quiet. Sarai sat on the cot, her arms wrapped around her knees. Her eyes fixed on the floor, Ryland sat at the table, polishing a blade with slow, practiced movements. The silence stretched between them like a wall neither knew how to cross. Finally, Sarai spoke, her voice thin and sharp from holding back too long. "You want to know why they called me broken?" she whispered. Her words trembled, but her eyes were steady. Ryland did not look up, but he answered calmly, "I want to know who you really are." Her chest rose and fell, her hands tightening on the blanket. For a long time she had been silent, afraid that her story meant nothing, but now, with this human sitting across from her, she felt the weight pressing harder. "I was a warrior once," she said. Her voice shook, but there was strength beneath it. "I fought in the Alara Wars. I stood on the front lines with my people." Her eyes flickered with a memory, sharp and painful. "We were strong then, proud, and I was not weak." Ryland's eyes lifted slightly, but he said nothing. Letting her continue, her voice hardened, like she was carving her words from stone. "One night our outpost was attacked. We fought until the ground burned beneath us." Her hands clenched, trembling. "I was hit. My leg shattered." She looked down at the scar that ran from thigh to ankle. "I fell, and I could not stand again. My unit pulled back, they left me." Her breath caught, pain flashing in her eyes. "When they found me later, it was not to heal me. It was to sell me." Her words dropped like stones into the silence. "They said I was no longer useful, no longer a warrior, just broken." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she forced herself to keep going. "Every place I was taken, every market, every buyer. The word followed me. Broken, broken, broken." Tears stung her eyes, but she did not let them fall. She spat the word out like poison. "They called me less than nothing. A body worth only a bottle of liquor." Ryland's jaw tightened, his hands pausing on the blade. His silence was heavy, not because he did not care, but because he cared too much. Sarai looked at him, waiting for judgment, waiting for pity, waiting for him to see her the same way the others did. But his eyes did not carry pity. They carried fire. He stood slowly, rolling up his sleeve. Across his forearm ran a deep scar, twisted and ugly. "This was from the Draelis front," he said, his voice steady but low. "They left me too, bleeding in the dirt, because they thought I would not rise again." Sarai's eyes widened, her breath stilling in her throat. Ryland looked at her directly, his gaze like steel. "But I stood again," he said, "and so can you." His words carried no softness, no false comfort, only the weight of truth. "You are not broken, Sarai, you are surviving. And that is strength." Her hands trembled, her body shaking as though the weight of chains pressed down on her again. But something cracked inside her, something that had been buried under years of humiliation. She wanted to believe. She wanted to hold on to the fire in his voice. Her lips parted and she whispered, "But what if I cannot fight again?" Her words hung fragile in the air like a thin thread ready to snap. Ryland stepped closer, his shadow falling over her. "Then you will learn a new way to fight," he said. "Scars do not end you, they change you." His voice sharpened. "Your people saw weakness, I see a survivor. And survivors are dangerous because they cannot be broken twice." The room went silent again, but it was a different silence. Not heavy with fear, but filled with something new. Sarai's chest rose and fell, her breath shaky, her eyes wet for the first time. She let the tears fall, hot and unhidden, not because she felt worthless, but because someone had finally seen her as more. Ryland stood still, letting her cry, not reaching to comfort her, not touching her chains of pain. He knew some battles were fought inside in silence, and she needed to win this one herself. When the tears slowed, Sarai looked at him, her voice raw. "You do not know what it means to be cast aside, to be called useless every day." Ryland's lips pressed into a thin line, his eyes dark. "I know more than you think," he said quietly, "and I will prove it to you, not with words, but with what comes next." Her heart beat hard, her body still trembling, but inside something shifted, a seed buried deep within her, a small spark of the warrior she once was. It flickered now, weak but alive. She whispered to herself, maybe I was not destroyed, only waiting. And though the heater hummed softly, though the city groaned outside, inside that small shelter, A broken slave began to remember who she had been, and a human soldier made a vow in silence that the galaxy would see her worth again. The test of trust. The night was colder than usual. The winds of Zera Prime carrying dust and sparks through the narrow streets. Sarai walked beside Rylan as they left the shelter for supplies, her injured leg dragging but her spirit heavier than her steps. She had shared her story, she had cried before him. And yet he did not turn away. Instead, he had promised that scars did not end her. They only changed her. The words echoed in her mind, clashing with the voices of her past, voices that still called her broken, worthless trash. The streets outside the market were dangerous, filled with scavengers and raiders who hunted for weakness. Every shadow seemed to move, every whisper seemed aimed at her. Rylan walked steady, his hand near his weapon. His gaze scanning, he looked calm, but Sarai noticed how sharp his movements were, like a man who expected violence at any moment. They reached a broken plaza where old transport ships once landed. Now it was nothing but cracked tiles, burnt pillars, and ruined signs. Sarai felt the air shift, heavy, tense, like the silence before thunder. Her chest tightened and she whispered, "Something's wrong." Rylan's hand immediately rested on his sidearm, his eyes narrowing. "You're right," he said quietly. "We're not alone." Figures stepped out of the shadows. 5 raiders armed with blades and crude rifles. Their armor was pieced together from scrap metal. Their faces scarred, their eyes hungry. One of them laughed. A sharp sound in the cold air. Well, look what we have here. The human soldier and his broken pet." The words cut deep, stabbing into Sarai's chest like fire. Her hands clenched, her body shaking. Rylan's stance shifted, calm but ready. "She's not your concern," he said flatly. But the raiders only grinned wider, circling them like wolves. "She was on the block just nights ago," one spat. "Worth less than liquor. And now you guard her like treasure." Another raised his blade. "Hand her over, soldier, or we take her with your blood still warm on the ground." Sarai's breath quickened, fear rising. She had seen this before. She knew what raiders did to the weak. Her body screamed to hide, to curl, to disappear. But Rylan's voice broke through the noise in her head, steady and sharp. "Stay behind me," he said, pulling his weapon. The fight came fast, the raiders rushing with cruel laughter. Rylan fired 2 shots, dropping the first attacker. His movements quick and brutal, but the others pressed in, forcing him back toward the broken pillars. Sarai's heart pounded as she watched, frozen. Every instinct told her to hide, but another voice deep inside whispered something else, a voice she had not heard in years, the voice of the warrior she once was. Rylan blocked a strike but stumbled under the force of another. One raider raised his blade high, ready to strike him down. In that instant, Rylan threw something toward her, a small blade, its handle worn but steady. "Take it," he shouted. The weapon landed at her feet. Sarai stared at it, her hands trembling, her body frozen. Memories of battle flashed in her mind. The outpost, the fire, the moment her leg shattered. The moment she was left behind, her chest burned with fear. But also with rage, her breath came heavy. And she reached down, her fingers wrapping around the hilt. The raider's blade came down toward Rylan. Sarai moved without thinking. Her body remembering what her mind had forgotten, she lunged forward, her injured leg screaming in pain but holding. Her arm slashed upward, the blade cutting across the raider's side. The man screamed, stumbling back, his attack broken. Rylan turned, his eyes flashing as he saw her, not as a victim, not as a slave, but as a fighter. "Good!" he shouted, firing again at another attacker. Sarai's chest heaved, her body shaking, but her grip tightened on the blade. The raiders hesitated now, their mocking laughter gone, replaced with caution. The broken slave had struck like a warrior. Together, Rylan and Sarai fought back. He moved with soldier's precision, his shots sharp, his strikes heavy. She moved with desperation and memory, her attacks messy but fierce. The raiders began to fall one by one until the survivors cursed and fled into the shadows. The plaza grew quiet again. The only sound, Sarai's ragged breathing. Her hands shook, the blade slick in her grip. Her chest pounded as though it might break apart, but deep inside a fire had sparked. Small but real, she looked at Rylan, her eyes wide. Her voice a whisper. I fought," Rylan nodded. His face calm, but his eyes proud. "Yes," he said, "and you won." The words struck her harder than the fight itself. Her whole body trembled, not with fear, but with something she had thought was long dead. Worth. She stared at the blade in her hands, the blood on her knuckles, the ache in her leg. For the first time in years, she did not feel broken. She felt alive as they left the plaza. The city still groaning around them, Sarai whispered to herself, almost too quiet to hear. Maybe I'm still a warrior. Rising as a warrior, again, the days that followed were unlike anything Sarai had known in years. The cot in Ryland's shelter was rough. The heater hummed with a weak glow, but to her it felt like a palace compared to the chains. Every morning began the same way. Ryland waking early, his boots striking the floor, his voice steady. Up, Sarai, he would say. The day does not wait. And though her body ached, she rose, because something inside her told her not to waste this chance. At first, the training was brutal. Her injured leg betrayed her. Her balance faltered. Her arms trembled with weakness. Ryland placed a wooden staff in her hands, forcing her to fight against him in slow drills. She stumbled, fell, scraped her palms raw against the metal floor. Every failure made her want to scream, to throw the staff aside and walk away. But Ryland's voice cut through her doubt. You survived chains, he said. You can survive this. She hated him in those moments, hated his patience, hated his calm refusal to let her quit. But every night, when her muscles burned and her breath shook, she realized she had made it through another day. And each day she grew a little stronger. Her strikes grew sharper, her stance more solid. The pain in her leg never left, but she learned to move with it. Not against it, it no longer defined her. It became part of her fight. One evening, Ryland placed a real blade in her hand. Her heart pounded as the steel glinted in the heater's glow. She looked at him, fear flashing in her eyes. What if I fail again, she whispered. Ryland shook his head, his voice calm but firm. You will fail many times, he said. But failure does not end you. It builds you. She lifted the blade, her grip shaking. But when she struck against his guard, the sound rang loud, strong. Something inside her stirred. The old rhythm of battle. The old fire she thought was gone. Ryland's eyes met hers, steady and certain. There, he said quietly. That is the warrior they tried to bury. Outside the shelter, whispers began to spread. The marketplace traders had seen her walking beside the human. No chains on her wrists, no leash around her neck. Some laughed, calling Ryland a fool who wasted credits on a broken thing. But others spoke in hushed tones, saying they had seen her fight raiders in the plaza, saying the broken slave had cut men down. The story twisted and grew, and soon her name returned to the streets, not as trash, but as a shadow of fear. In the darker corners of the city, the slavers who had mocked her now clenched their teeth. A woman once worth a bottle of liquor now carried blades again. To them it was an insult, a challenge to their power. One slaver slammed his fist on the table, snarling, "No slave rises without punishment." We will remind her of her place, and so plans were made. Cruel whispers carried through the alleys. They would strike, not in the market, but in the place she thought was safe. Inside the shelter, Sarai felt the change within herself. Her arms carried strength again. Her body learned to endure pain without collapsing. But it was not only her body that grew sharper. Her spirit began to rise. For years she had walked with her head bowed, her voice silent. Now she found herself standing taller, her eyes brighter, her voice steady when she spoke. She no longer looked like a broken slave. She looked like a fighter finding her way back. Still, the fear never fully left her. Some nights she woke shaking, her hands gripping the blanket. Her breath fast memories of chains, of the trader's laugh, of the crowd jeering, haunted her dreams, but when she woke, she always saw Ryland sitting nearby, cleaning his weapon, his presence solid. He never spoke when she woke in fear, never asked questions, but his silence was a shield, telling her she was not alone one night. After training left her breathless and bruised, Sarai looked at him and asked, "Why do you push me so hard?" Ryland's eyes met hers, steady as always. "Because the galaxy will not go easy on you," he said. "If you want them to see your worth, you must show them not with words, but with strength." Her chest tightened at his words. She thought of the raiders, of the slavers, of the crowd that once mocked her, and she whispered to herself, "Then I will show them." But outside, in the silence of the city's underbelly, shadows gathered, slavers armed themselves, readying chains and weapons. They spoke of teaching her a lesson, of breaking her again in front of all. They wanted to remind the galaxy that no slave could rise. The night crept closer, heavy with danger, and as Sarai slept with the blade beside her cot, she did not know that her next test was coming. Not in training, not in words, but in blood and fire. Her true worth. The night fell heavy over Zera Prime. The streets alive with shadows inside the shelter. Sarai sat sharpening the blade Rylan had given her. Her hands steady now, not trembling like before. Each strike of metal against stone echoed in the small room. She was no longer the woman who once flinched at every sound, no longer the slave afraid of every glance. But outside, danger moved closer, hidden in the dark. The slavers came without warning, their boots striking hard against the ground, doors shattered, metal splinters flying as they stormed inside, chains rattled in their hands, cruel laughter spilling from their mouths. "There she is," one shouted, "the broken slave who dares call herself a fighter." Sarai froze for a heartbeat, her chest burning as old fear tried to return. The smell of the auction, the sound of jeering voices, the word broken echoed in her skull. But then Rylan's voice cut through the chaos, calm and sharp. "Remember who you are," he said, his weapon already raised. The slavers lunged, their chains swinging, their blades flashing. The fight exploded in the small shelter, steel against steel. Gunfire cracking in the dark. Sarai's heart pounded, but her body moved. Every lesson, every strike, every stumble during training returned now. Her injured leg burned with pain, but it no longer stopped her. She slashed with precision, her blade singing through the air. One slaver fell, his chain clattering uselessly to the floor. Another roared and charged, but Sarai pivoted, striking his side with strength she thought was gone. The shelter shook with the struggle, but Sarai did not falter. Her movements were messy, raw but filled with fire. She fought not just to survive, but to prove to herself, to them, to the galaxy, that she was more than what they called her. Rylan fought beside her, his shots cutting down those who tried to flank. His voice steady in the storm, but it was Sarai who drew the eyes. Sarai who stood at the center like a flame refusing to die. The last slaver spat blood, sneering. "You think you're a warrior again, but you'll always be nothing. Always broken?" Sarai's chest heaved, her blade trembling in her grip. But her eyes were no longer filled with fear. They burned. She stepped forward, her voice ringing loud. "I was never broken," she said, her tone like iron, and with one final strike, she ended the fight. Silence fell heavy after the clash. The shelter was wrecked, the floor stained, the air thick with smoke and blood. Sarai stood tall, her body shaking but her eyes alive around them. Neighbors and traders had gathered, drawn by the noise. They stared wide-eyed at the woman they once mocked, the one they called worthless. The whispers began, sharp and fearful. "She fought them," one muttered. "The slave fought and won." "She is no slave," another whispered. "She is something more." The same marketplace that had once laughed at her name now watched her with awe. The words broken and worthless fell away, replaced with silence, replaced with fear and respect. Sarai stood in the doorway of the shelter, her blade still in hand, her chest rising with heavy breath. For the first time in years, she did not bow her head. She did not shrink from their eyes. She met them one by one, daring them to see her not as trash, but as a warrior. Rylan stepped beside her, his jacket torn, his eyes proud. He looked at the crowd and spoke, his voice strong. "You measured her at the price of liquor," he said. "But I tell you now, her worth is greater than any of you can count." The crowd did not answer. Their silence was enough. Sarai's hands trembled around the blade, but her spirit did not. She whispered softly, only for herself. "They said I was nothing, but I am still standing." Her eyes turned upward, to the towers that glowed with false lights, and for the first time she believed her own words. The story of the broken slave spread across Zera Prime, but it did not end with laughter this time. It spread with fear, with respect, with whispers of the woman who fought beside a human soldier and rose again. Her scars had not disappeared, her pain had not vanished, but she had proved to the galaxy what Rylan had seen from the start, that her worth was never lost, only hidden, that she was not broken, only waiting to rise. And as the night passed, Sarai stood taller than she ever had, a warrior reborn, carrying her scars not as shame but as proof. The market once measured her at the price of a bottle of liquor, but now they could never measure her at all.